Hello out there. Got a little job today to do. That is repair a magneto. This is a magneto for my 1936 1020 McCormick Deering tractor you might have seen on this channel before. A couple years ago now, I was driving at a plow day, not a plow match, just a bunch of old timers get together and plow a field. And it would start great, running strong, and then all of a sudden, once it got hot, it would bing, ba-bing, ba-bing, and it would start running on one cylinder, and then you put a load on it, it would die. You couldn't go anywhere. It would kind of idle. As soon as you put any load, it would die. So I talked to some people, and just through other engine stuff, we figured it was probably the coil. And so looked around for another mag. That year of 1020 used an F4 magneto, so they're not rare by any stretch. But the one that I had was very dependable before that, and it was in very good shape. It's actually right here. It has a very strong and reliable impulse coupling, which is the little device here that gives a good hard snap when you're turning at slow speed that occurs when you're hand cranking the tractor. So there's like a little spring mechanism in there that holds back part of the...
Here is where my good old microphone shot the bed, so let me explain with a voiceover. The impulse coupling holds back a little piece with a spring, and once that piece reaches a certain point in the rotation, it lets go, and that spring gives it a quick shot forward, and that's what generates a good hard spark at a slow rotation. So I forget what else I was trying to explain here, so let's not worry about that and cut on to the good stuff. So this box came from the Brillman Company down in Virginia, and I must say I'm very impressed with the speed that it came, and no hassle anywhere along the line. The shipping cost was fair, which is from the States to Canada, and 4 items I got. So a new coil, of course, new condenser, new little carbon springy thingamabobs that go inside the cap, and new points just as a backup. The point shouldn't be, well, I'll go into that later, but the points are fine in this mag, so I have them in spares now. And so are the carbons. I just had to clean them a little bit. They got some oil inside, so the springs didn't push them as well as they should have. But anyway, the originals are still fine, so those are also spares. So the Brillman Company specializes in repro or newly made wiring harnesses, I should say, for vintage tractors. And they also have a bunch of electrical components, so I suggest you check them out if you're in that wheelhouse. I was pointing out there at the mag that the rotor kind of had a worn groove in it, which was a little bit crazy, but anyway, it has lots of life yet, so there's no problem there. I popped the cover for the points as well, had a look, made sure the little contact pads were in good order and nothing was outright worn out or exploded, and it looked fine. So we'll get right to it and start to strip it apart. So off comes the horseshoe magnet, and that takes a little bit of prying, but the only thing holding it is the little top clip, which has 2 short screws. Once that's out of the way, there's the cap. It has 2 long screws in the front on the impulse side, and then it has 2 short screws on the bottom by the point side. Here I'm just pointing to the fact that the little high voltage lead is kind of slipped off the teat on the top of the coil, which is no good, could very well be contributing to the faulty spark situation. So now the little plastic or bakelite protrusion, which holds the high voltage lead from the coil to the cap, can be taken off. There's 2 screws. You want to really look at that closely, see if it's cracked or goofed up in any way, because if something's weird, the spark can kind of wander somewhere that it shouldn't, and it'll detract from the power of spark to the plug. So have a good look at that if you're messing with one. Then I'll go ahead and pop the condenser off, just the nut on top, and then it's held with 1 screw and a little retaining bracket, and then the wires out of the way. That I'll replace. So next is the whole tower for the pinion. That's held by 2 screws as well on top. And then you might need to kind of knock it once those are out to free up a couple little locating pins in the bottom. Once you finally get the tower out of the way, and here I'm just kind of, well, I was familiarizing myself with how the timing mark is fixed, because you want to make sure that that pinion gear is engaged properly with the little gear in the bottom. So once that's free, it comes out of the way and it will expose the rear screw for the coil core. There are coil core screws on both ends, and of course you have to remove the pinion tower to get at the internal one. You can also see the shims on the bottom. Those are very important. Got to make sure they're clean. Those kind of set the spacing between the pinion and the rotor gears. A little bit of elbow grease came in handy here to give proper torque to get both screws for the coil core out. The one kind of the ground strap end of the coil kind of wedges the screws, and they're awful tight, but no rust, so good news there. It came out with a little bit of force.
So good news, with a little bit of finessing, got the coil out. The screws were extremely tight, but nothing was particularly rusty or problematic, as they say. Put that there. So the core has to come out. The iron core of this has to come out so we can reuse it in the new one. But I don't have an arbor press, so we'll be making do with the drill. So there we go. That's just a dead center I put in there. A little bit of end play you got to adjust the collar for. Anyway, where are we? Raise that up. There we go. Good support. There she goes. Oh my goodness, what the heck? That rust or grease? I don't know. Oh, smells vintage anyway. Wow. Need a little bit more depth on her. There we go. So that core is pretty darn clean, which is surprising. There's a hair of rust on this side, just slight. So I'll get that off of there and we'll pop it into the new one. Okay, back to it here. New coil, got the core. Nice and snug, not nearly as tight as the old one, but should be okay. Try the same thing again, but backwards. So, on these guys, I'm just going to make sure that there's no obvious anything crazy. I'm sure you can tell by now, but I'm far from a magneto specialist. I'll spin this guy. Oh, make sure the impulse is disengaged for ease of rotation. And I'll look for the two teeth that have a ground off. There we are. Can you see that? That's your timing mark. There's two teeth that have ground off fronts, and then there's a little hole, little divot in this rotor gear right down here, which of course fits in the middle of those two. So I'm just going to wipe those shims off to make sure there's no grit. This is also a get her going again job. This is not by any means a magneto restoration. I should really get a new rotor, but it has life in it yet. There we go. On top of these screws, there are also locating pins on this little protrusion. So I do have a little bit of a displeasure with this modern condenser. If you look at the original, the threads go all the way down to the little seat, but the modern one, there's about an eighth of an inch gap on the bottom, and that means the original little terminal here used to stop at that step, so I just spent a good amount of time filing it out, opening up a little bit. And that also means the nut will basically go all the way down the thread. But thankfully, between these two things and the lock washer, it should be okay. Put those two there. That should work, but it would be nicer if the coil had a little bit pointier of a teat kind of on the top here for the contact, because it's so rounded that there is a risk that that happens and the little wire falls off. Put a little drop of oil right into that hole, or a couple. Up over the impulse. Both sides back here for good measure. Okay. Well, here we are. Whole thing still sitting where I left it and walk away, which is good. Friggin' shrapnel all in here from mice or squirrels or something. Ooh wee. Hope no one's home. So all that I just did was put a screwdriver in the spark plug hole to find top dead center of number 1, and then line it up with when the little copper thing inside there is lined up with number 1 on the cap. And right cast on the block says order 1342. So I'll pop the cap back on and confirm. Even though it's not bolted down, we'll confirm that we're getting spark. So past 1, 3 just fired, then 4, 2, and then back to 1. Okay, now we should be ready for number 1 to go. Felt like it might have missed there. Oh, my mistake. The cap's all the way at the top, which means it's grounding itself. Gee whiz. Hopefully that was the problem. There it is. So it just sparked, so I should be able to feel number one is going to start going down now, which it is. Perfect. Okay, so I'll bolt her and then give it a sniff of gas. Okay, go have a quick look at the other side. Make sure you're not going to suck a squirrel in. Oh, we still have gas in there. Well, let's give it some choke and see what happens. We'll put some magical mustard right into the priming cups. And if this doesn't work, it might mean that I'm backwards. I'm on the wrong stroke of the 4 strokes, which is a quick fix. Just switch where that coupling is. Oh. Nothing, so I think I'm gonna have to switch that. So I mentioned I thought the coupling was a little bit off, or fully off actually. All we'll do is take this and I'll spin the mag. 2 rotations of this means 2 positions of spark difference. So I was firing on 1 when I wanted to fire on 3. Now I know what you're thinking. Young fellow, be careful what you do with the magneto. The timing's going to be off. It's going to kick. You're going to get sucked in. You're going to get all shredded and your arm's going to explode. Yes, but I'm aware of that. And if you look at how I'm cranking the handle, it will minimize my risk. Oh. Come on. Oh. Come on. Oh, can't run her too long. Got no water. Well, thanks for watching. That was I'm awful glad with that result. Now that she's back running again, there's a 1920s or so sawmill edging saw to get going and to run with it, or to at least test out with it. So I don't have much else to say, but stick around, more videos to come. Hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.